She been ever.
Okay, councillors, we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, councillors, thank you for coming along to this special council meeting. Declare the meeting open. Start with the acknowledgement of country. The Shire of Dartmouth wishes to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on traditional lands of the Noongar people. In doing this, we recognise and respect their continuing culture, the contribution they make to the life of this region, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. The Shire of Dartmouth also respects and celebrates all cultures of all our residents and visitors to our Shire. Emergency procedure is out the door across the road. The affirmation of civic duty and responsibility is there for councillors and staff, and a note for the recording of the meetings in accordance with section 5.23a of the Local Government Act 1995 and part 2a of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996. Video or audio recordings of council meetings apply to all ordinary and special council meetings of the Shire of Dartmouth. All recordings will be retained as part of the Shire of Dartmouth records and will be made available to the public via the Shire of Dartmouth website, excluding recordings of matters that council take behind closed doors. Record of attendance and apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Webster and leave of absence for Councillor Lilly at the moment. No more. And the councillors that are in the room we have. Thank you. Previous meetings are there. Response to previous public. Yes.
Sorry, through the chair, the Director of Corporate and Governance is also an apology for tonight.
Thank you, Andre. Response to previous public questions taken on notice. There are none. No public question time required. There's no gallery. Applications for leave of absence. None. Petitions, deputations, presentations. There is none. The ordinary council meeting for the 26th of March we will confirm at the next ordinary council meeting. There are no announcements by the presiding member without discussion. No announcements of matters for which the meeting may be closed. No questions by members of which due notice has been given. Declarations of interest. I will be declaring impartiality interest in item 12.1.1 as I sat on the development assessment panel, and encourage us to declare an impartiality interest if we've had previous dealings on an item. 12.1 decommissioning the Tronox waste cell, clearing conditions 2, 4 and 5. Resolutions there. Is there any discussion required first hand? Andre.
Through the chair, in addition to what's been published as part of the special council meeting agenda, there has been some movements, particularly that the applicant has appealed the conditions to the State Administrative Tribunal, and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage as the administrators of the RDAP was involved in that appeal. Initially, the directions hearing for that appeal was scheduled for Friday the 11th of April. Between the applicant and the respondent being RDAP and the applicant being Cleanaway, they have reached consent orders, which was presented to an expedited direction hearing yesterday afternoon at 12:30, and at that SAT directions hearing, SAT agreed to those consent orders and made those orders as such. Those orders have been included in an addendum which has been added to each of you on the table here. There were some councillors in the room a bit before the council meeting has had an opportunity to read through that. In short, I'll provide my overview of it and ask the Director of Sustainable Development to maybe add to it, but effectively what the consent orders means is that stage 1 of the approval that's been granted will no longer require the plans or the conditions to be cleared, and effectively those plans will only be required prior to stage 2. So the plans will probably now need to be updated to reflect that, and as such officers are recommending an alternative motion to what has been published in the special council meeting agenda, and for that motion is effectively just for councillors to note the amended conditions and how they read. And secondly, that council request that the closure and rehabilitation plan include a monitoring regime which includes quarterly testing, and for that to be provided to the Shire of Dartmouth. And thirdly, that council requests the CEO to advocate to the department to ensure that the regulatory compliance officer is located within the Bunbury geographic region. So that is an alternative that's been presented in hard copy to yourselves, councillors. I'll hand over to Mr. Nair to just explain in more detail what those changes to the conditions are and effectively how they will take effect.
Thank you, Andre. I'm not going to add too much on it because you summarised it very well. My discussions, a lot's happened in the last 7 days and more so the last 48 hours in relation to, as Andre said, expedited directions hearing, but ultimately the intent of the conditions haven't changed. There's just more, the requirements of ultimately acknowledge there are 2 stages. Stage 1 is been identified as having a lower risk impact, and therefore discussions with the DAP executive and with the Cleanaway, the applicant, is that they are satisfied for the conditions to allow the applicant to start stage 1 works because that's the immediate need for them. But prior to stage 2 works, there are some updated plans required to be submitted, and that's really to capture the monitoring requirements. So the intent of the conditions is still there, council. They've just removed any clearing of plans, any updated information being submitted prior to the initial work starting. So what I discussed with the DAP Direct Executive through DPLH is they were comfortable because the intent of the conditions was still there, and under the State Administrative Tribunal Act, where there are minor amendments to the conditions proposed and where both parties agree, the SAT have the power to amend the conditions as opposed to ordering any reconsiderations.
Thanks, Ashwin.
I've put an officer comment down under every one of those conditions that amended, just to provide some comfort to council that the intent of the conditions are still being met.
Thanks, Ashwin. So even there's a little bit more rigour being put on that monitoring as a result of this process?
It was discussed that the monitoring is required before stage 2 starts and after stage 2 finishes. But separate to that, we've asked for more robust monitoring in terms of the quarterly reports. The condition that stands now asks for annual reports.
Thanks, Ashwin. Any questions? Does anyone need a bit longer to read that extra information? Everyone's happy? Questions? Okay. Got a resolution there, councillors. Councillor Janor, happy to move? The white one?
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Councillor Janor. Okay. Councillor Bell seconding. You wish to speak?
Yeah, so going back last week at the workshop, it was beneficial to have that presentation given to us by Dr. North, explaining the science behind the Tronox cell capping and the process it will take to cap that cell. The execution of how it's to be completed being the responsibility of the area owner, and is a fair comment to make. And should the capping of the cell not be capped correctly, it will again be the responsibility of the area owner, so be it Tronox or Cleanaway. The concern I have, and I've stated it previously and I'll state it again, is the management, the quality and the accountability of compliance. The Banksy Road complex, as I understand it, has previously struggled to meet compliance, and as I said before, we're going to add additional compliance. It doesn't fill me with confidence that additional compliance will be met nor challenged appropriately by the regulator. as amended, I can only hope that the additional points added to the resolution go some way to improving the compliance and intervention from the regulator should compliance not be met. There is concern from myself and from others that should the capping in some way fail to be implemented to a best practice standard and the cell leak fail or overflow, be it in 20, 30 or 40 years' time into the future, who's going to bear the cost of this? Who bears the cost of this if the business and business responsibility of Tronox or Cleanaway have ceased to operate? If the HDP liner is compromised and tailings leach into the groundwater, will it be the Dardanup Shire who bears the recovery cost of this? I'd be less aggrieved by this if there was a fallback, and a fallback such as an environmental recovery trust that could be drawn down on should such a failure happen. However, that opportunity to add a condition such that has passed us by. Since the initial start-up of the Banksy Road complex, I doubt there have been many officer recommendations that have been approved by council in the first instance, and I suppose this would give a fairly accurate representation of both the council and the community's acceptance of the Banksy Road complex in our community. From this, I have to ask, what is the point of bringing any of these items before council? We're asked to make decisions on the community and the community's best interest, though when these decisions are made by council that aren't in the favour of corporations, they go straight to DAP, JDAP or SAT to challenge it. In any case, corporations and the interest of corporate stakeholders take priority over the community in which they operate, and have both the community and council over the proverbial barrel. It feels to me like corporations have a hand around our throats and bureaucracy led by the state government agencies have our hands pinned behind our backs. This is not the way I thought being on council nor representing the community would be. However, in supporting the officer's recommendations, I do so reluctantly, though I do hope that the additions to the resolution is noted by the applicant and the additional consideration is taken into account for future applications and resolutions at the Banksy Road complex.
Thanks, Councillor North. Councillor Bell, speak.
I find it quite frustrating that under policy procedure and planning legislation, we don't have many options when it comes to both the landowner, the operator and the users of that area. I am not living in a fairy world where I think that Cleanaway can't exist or a landfill facility can't exist. We're in an overconsumptive society where we're heavily marketed towards consuming, and a lot of that is unsustainable consuming, a lot of plastic-based products, so it has to go somewhere. So I'm not living in a world where I think that the landfill can magically disappear, but I am really disappointed in the lack of compliance and the lack of regulation that is able to be provided to this landholder. And I think that it's really difficult to expect a local government with a finite number of ratepayers to be funding the enforcement, especially when DUA have a much more significant recourse for funding. They can get funding from other avenues than what we can. They have more funding available to them. And there have been instances in the past where they've not been present on site or at incidents because they've believed that the Shire's either doing a good job of compliance or is present and can do the compliance, which I think is lacking. So I'm happy to second this motion on that we're trying to advocate to DUA that they need to have compliance down here and that they should be capable of funding that.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Anyone against? Any further for? Briefly, thanks Councillor Genora and Councillor Bell for moving the recommendation as it stands, noting that there is those couple of extra items in there the CEO to request of Dwyer and Cleanaway, and noting that presentation by Dr. North was quite valuable to the councillors who were able to attend that and get that extra information. Yes, it's decisions been taken out of our hands, but we do need to note what has happened on that site. So that's the way the cookie crumbles. Any further against? Wish to close, Councillor Janelle?
No, all good, thank you.
Okay, councillors, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, there's none, that's 6. Okay, councillors, we can go to collective member motions of previous notice has been given. There is none. No new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. No public question time. Nothing behind closed doors. I'll declare the meeting closed, bearing in mind the next ordinary council meeting will be Wednesday, the 23rd of April, here on at 5 p.m. Meeting closed. Thanks for coming along, councillors.